Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Social Distance Show. My name is Ben Barber. I am your host. Dave reminded me that I have stopped saying that I hope that this is the last episode because I am fully aware that it is not the last episode anymore. But whatever, because we're having fun doing this. So I just want to say, first of all, happy Earth Day to everybody. It's kind of a big day. I mean, at least it seems like it is in my house because I've been doing preschool all week and fun recycling projects and reading the Lorax, which got me thinking about trees. Actually, that's not true. I was never thinking about trees. It was all about what my guest was thinking about. So I'm going to bring her on right now because she has a wonderful story about the deforestation of New England and the reforestation of New England. Um, in the you know what, I literally am so uneducated on this. I'm going to just bring her on. Jacquelyn Smith, how are you?
Hi, I'm good. I'm terrified that I have to do this, but you've been good to us, so
you,
I'm gonna do it.
you
So
didn't have to do this. I didn't like ransom you. like
it's true. It's true.
so by you saying that you've been good to us, you are the parish administrator for Christ Church Westerly.
Hmm.
And I've been helping out with all of the live streams and stuff for the services.
Eternally grateful. Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm happy to do it. But you are also somewhat of a historian, and you've done a lot of work and in that stuff. And we were just having a conversation about interesting facts in history, and you mentioned how about 250 years ago or something, there were almost no trees. There were no forests in New England.
Right.
And since it's Earth Day, we thought that that might be a fun conversation to have for people. So, say, tell us what's up.
Well, it's actually probably about 150 years ago we
Okay.
had devastating deforestation. So across all of New England was about 80% deforested, but then after um, but but there were certain areas that were just devastated, and those were your cities. But do you want me to start with this story?
Yeah, please start with the story. I'm not paying attention to you, by the way. I'm pulling up the pictures that you sent me
Oh, you're welcome. Okay,
so
well,
that
you're
I
going to need
can.
them soon.
Yeah,
Okay,
exactly.
so we all know the colonial idea is that, you're just going to pillage and take what you want and take all your resources. So, England actually claimed our trees, and we had to send them to England to be produced into wood and buy them back. So it was all about money. When after the colonial era was over, now these trees were ours, and now the industrial revolution is going to start taking off because we have the access to this amazing resource. So this is all the background information. People people basically abandoned their farms and went out to the cities and just started working there. Then we're gonna take those resources for houses and paper, which is going to be more important later on. So here comes this guy, Henry David Thoreau. He he went to Harvard. He's like a failure to launch sort of situation, and he was like a leader in the transcendentalism movement, which was really fascinating and something great to bring up right now because transcendentalism was questioning everything in their culture. So they're questioning they were religious, but they didn't like some of the traditions. They were questioning slavery and gender equality. And I think that's something really interesting now that we're doing because we're really questioning um, what church means, what it means to go to work. So it's fun to tie him in, and he's also the father of environmentalism. So he's a cool person to talk about today. Um, so he kind of just like wandered around, and he just failed at his jobs. He worked for his dad. And then he writes this amazing book called Civil Disobedience, which is the what we use today for for a peaceful protest. So he's just like a cool guy. But then we have him like starting to fall in love with trees, and like it was a little more than just like I like trees. It was unfortunately probably couldn't have a relationship with him, but he loved white pines, and he started pushing this idea that like we need to really protect these forests, and we're and at that point in time we were at one of the worst points of deforestation. um, so now enter John Astor Warder, who comes along a little bit later. He's the opposite of him, and um, he's a doctor, but just fascinated by trees by like hobby. And so he starts eventually the Reforest America project, which this is the guy who started Arbor Day and why we celebrate Earth Day today. So I had to mention him. Um, but so he's like starting to put out like these amazing uh, works of literature about how important it is to start reforesting. And at that point, people were like, wow, this is really interesting. And then climate change started to happen, and people like historic floods where people were, losing their property. And then all of a sudden, I'm finding newspaper articles about how deforestation is actually, changing the river temperature. So we're going to
And
have
what
like,
and what and what year are we talking about?
so we're up to the 1880s.
And we're talking about climate change and the temperature of the river and
Yep.
okay. Yep.
So Connecticut River didn't get trout one year, and this was going to destroy like the industry. So now we're talking people's pockets. And it turned out it was because the tree-lined river wasn't tree-lined anymore, and it wasn't providing shade to the river. The temperature went up, and now we have we're not getting our food source in. So now people are getting like really frustrated, and I think the newspaper articles were getting so fascinating. The opinion sections of deforestation in the 1880s and 1890s were getting angry in tone. Now, at that point, I started seeing like the public enemy of the movement was the paper industry. And like, I just can't even imagine like how much paper they used back then. I mean, and they're even printing this on paper. So they're in between a rock and a hard place. I mean, so in 1907, Rhode Island finally got on this boat and started a commission. And part of the commission was saying how much money this person would make, and it was going to be $500. And then it said, but for paper, for materials and promotional materials, we're going to give them $300 worth of paper. And I'm like, this whole thing is around paper. You guys, you're like amazing. So, but I think like, and to keep my story short, because oh boy, like this is a saga. I really loved seeing the grassroots movement change from like anger and frustration to like really, we have a plan and we're working together. We are going to reforest New England. New England itself, all of the trees for the most part were used for the paper industry. So we're talking like the Midwest was being used for, the railroad system, but we're using it for paper. So that's something different. So we start seeing articles of like how to reforest your yard. This is what you do to look for acorns to send, and then there's like advertisements for like 1 bushel, find a bushel of acorns in your yard and we'll give you $4 to $5. And then they were sending them all over the country. But
it was a group community effort to reforest New England.
but I mean, it was equivalent of, World War II personality, where you have a mission in your country, and Roosevelt really pushed that camaraderie, that this is not like a one-man job. They hired 3 million people to plant trees, and they purchased these acorns, they relied on people to donate them. And after all was said and done, it was like 3 billion trees that were like replanted. But so my favorite thing was like, okay, so we know YouTube channels, people get really excited about their progress. So there's one from Mrs. S.W. Eddy from Connecticut where she posted, how to store your acorns so that they don't start growing, um, until you could reforest your yard in the spring. And it was like this kind of tutorial. And I was just like picturing what it would be like for YouTube. Like, hi, Mrs. Eddy here. Here's 3 quick steps for reforesting your yard in the spring. Like, click like and subscribe. I don't know what she would have done if she was here.
Could we do this now? Could we do, like, is this something, because they had a climate change issue, and obviously we have a climate change issue right now. And by the way, the sort of the World War II-esque thing reminds me a lot of what's happening right now with
Mhm.
people that can make masks, and like at Christ Church, like the Sisters Who Sew, and many people who are Donna Dexter, who's a fan of the show. I wouldn't say fan. She watches this show and puts up with me sometimes. That are out there doing wonderful work. And getting masks out to the community. It's really nice to hear any story about the people of America coming together, or the people of a city or a state coming
Right.
together.
And, I was thinking that this story, how I was told like 20 years ago, was some guy who did it all. And as I always say, you know, history is tough. We talk a lot about George Washington and the things that, he did, but there's so many people who play such an active role and don't get remembered, which is why I was so excited about Mrs. Eddy, um, because she was doing her part. She was researching how to store acorns. And, um, so we have more trees now than we did 100 years ago. But I read an article that came out 3 years ago that Harvard found that we are really actively deforesting New England again. And I quote that if we continue this, we're going to ruin our second chance, which was in reference to that grassroots community coming together, figuring out how to reforest. And it's not just, sorry, but it's
No,
not
go ahead.
just the fact that New England got reforested. It's the fact that these people were running around their yards and sending these acorns and seeds out to Europe and Asia. Like China just reforested not too long ago, and to the rest of the country.
Right. Speaking of Eastern countries, Japan. Most of our trees are from Japan now.
So I
Is
don't know
that
if that's true. It's
okay?
just the story that I heard, but I couldn't actually verify.
Can you just make stuff up and
That's
and
what
and and agree
historians
and agree
do.
with me and agree with
Yeah,
me?
exactly. But that's the
Yeah.
thing. Like these stories, just get passed along, and it's so hard to find this data because we focus so much on certain eras in history and certain people. And like, luckily, I have access to old newspapers, where I'm really pulling out the actual facts of these stories in primary resources. But it's so sad to think that a lot of these major players that are protected our environment for the last 100 years are getting lost in history, and
Yeah.
you know and we're making the same mistakes again, which is because those stories got lost.
Right. Um, I mean, it's hard enough to fact check things now, and you're trying to fact check things from 150 years ago. So what level? How difficult is that? Like, what level of factual or just inaccuracies or opinion? Like, how do you determine what it was opinion from a newspaper from 150 years ago? I mean, you hope that they were a little bit less opinionated than you might think of a media outlet now, where everybody seems to be one way or another, adding their spin on stories. Um, I mean, you'd like to believe that 150 years ago it was just the facts, but like how hard is it to discern what is truth in history?
Well, that's the thing. Even in history, they have an agenda, people do. But when you're like when I started to pull this story together with when the reforestation actually happened, I had, you know, dozens of articles that came up corroborating the same information, and people are not in that much collusion to be corroborating the fact that people keep blaming climate change. People are noticing, I mean, we actually have noticed in our lifetime that, you know, our rivers are changing temperature, but, you know, so I think it's just all about the amount of documents and, not being afraid to keep checking different resources. And legal documents are really essential too.
Absolutely. And you said our lifetime. So what is the? I mean, you talked about climate change from 150 years ago, but in our lifetime, like, what is the rate of climate change in the last 75 years versus 150 years ago?
Well, I think it's really interesting to see the transition from all of the uh, ecological problems they were having with the massive floods and the temperatures changing, and then starting to replant trees and seeing this really positive change, and then forgetting that that's what we were supposed to be doing, and then seeing that positive change start going away. Um,
And those
so
who forget history are doomed to repeat it.
Right. And we are. And, Harvard even warned us 3 years ago, like we're ruining our second chance. And
Yep.
I think this is such a great time to really bring this up because people are feeling so powerless. But I feel powerless in a lot of ways, but just knowing how it was just people being really excited about replanting and actually doing it and taking their part, they're like, okay, I can look for seeds. I can do that. Okay, I have this land. I can plant. So I mean, if we just find the role that we can play, maybe we could put up the Earth Day 2020, donate link. So maybe you could just spare a few dollars and then we can start, making sure we're protecting what we still have because we could fix an economy, but at a certain point we can't fix our earth or it will just take us over. And, that's cool too.
Absolutely. Completely. Can you hear the knocking on my door right now? Come in. Come in.
Oh
Good
no.
night. Good night. I love you.
Brayden.
It's Jackie. Do you want to say hi to Jackie? All right. Um, thank you, Allie. All right. So yeah, as Jacquelyn was saying, um, am I pronouncing that right? Caswell got me crazy about if I'm pronouncing it right. You can go to Earth Day .org/donate, and there's tons of stuff that you can do on there. I also changed the lower third at the bottom to say the deforestation and reforestation and deforestation of New England, because that's accurate, and that's what we're doing right now. Is we are in the process of deforestation again,
Right.
and
I just
so I'll
love
put a
like
link up there.
it's so much fun to go through history and see like all of those like tones of like there were like equivalents of Twitter rants it was like hashtag deforestation for a while. Like it's such a keyword. It just kept coming up it just so frequently at a certain point in time. And then it started changing to hashtag reforestation. So I mean, even without the hashtags. But
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
it's 2020. Like
Right.
I gotta analyze things the way that I understand.
I love it. So I also would like to say that tonight, after this, we directly after this we have Lieutenant Governor Dan McKee, who's going to be talking and answering your questions. If you have them on Ask Dan, you can watch it on Westerly Live, or follow Lieutenant Governor Dan McKee on Facebook or YouTube. And then after that, Caswell Cook has Ask Caswell, or whatever the heck that name of that show is right now. And
Do you sleep?
no, I don't. I don't sleep because I have another show after that too. But we have Tim Brennan on, and that's the only reason why I'm doing the plugs right now, is to get to Tim Brennan, who is the owner of Two Little Fish. And right now, Two Little Fish is open, and they are doing curbside and all of that stuff, which is great. But in general, since it's Earth Day, I think that Tim Brennan is the perfect whatever, owner to have on a show, because Jackie, are you familiar with the all of the things that is happening at Two Little Fish over the past few years?
Nope.
No, they are an amazing, sustainable business. They are right on the water line between the ocean and the pond. And because of that, they switched over to all biodegradable silverware and plates and bags. And they donate their used oil to like uh, some biofuel and like they give money to Mystic Aquarium. And so I didn't even realize, and I know for sure Caswell did not plan out to have Tim Brennan on his show on Earth Day, but it's a wonderful coincidence, and you got me thinking about that.
Yeah.
Um,
Don't get me started on the plastic industry. Don't
Please do.
don't.
I'm I'm gonna ask you to, not on the show because I have other things that
Right.
I have to do now, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But please get started on the plastic industry, and then come back and can you just come back? Will you come back and rant at me more about something?
Yeah, but like so it's so funny because you obviously have you asked me to come another time, and I was like, oh, I don't want to research the right now. And I was going to do the Battle of Rhode Island, which is another thing that people don't really know about, and it's so fascinating and a major turning point in history. No one's heard of it, which makes me sad. So I was like collecting research for that slowly, and then yesterday it's like, hey, can you talk about this subject that you don't know much about it? And I was like, I'm gonna be up late tonight.
You didn't have to say yes.
Oh yeah, but I mean, Earth Day. We
Yeah.
talked about it before. So it seemed like really great. So I hope this really inspired everyone who is watching to do a little bit and start working on the reforestation and know that it really actually worked 100 years ago. So it's worth doing.
And Jackie knows because she was there.
Oh
Because
my gosh.
uh,
You're gonna tell me that? Well, to see now I went from 80 to like 150.
you're a witch. Now, however, I know that you were interested in talking about the Battle of Rhode Island, but today on Food for Thought, Father Sunil had the Chief of Police of Stonington on, and he mentioned the Battle of Stonington.
Which was epic.
Yeah, so now I need you to come on and talk about the Battle of Stonington,
Oh yeah.
because you told me like three lines about it, like three sentences about it, and I want to hear more. So yeah, so let's end with that. Why don't you just give a little bit of context, just the
Okay.
three sentences that you
Okay.
told me about the Battle of
All right.
Stonington.
I'm really good at boiling down history because I yell it at people all the time.
She
Okay.
does.
All right. So, Battle of Stonington, Stonington Borough. They get a letter from this English commander, and it says, I'm sure it said this. Hey, how you doing? We're gonna rampage your town and take over in an hour. So you might want to get your women and kids out, and you too. Okay, thanks, bye. And then they were like, what the heck is this? We have an hour to evacuate our town. That's impossible. And you know what? I don't want to. So instead, they went and they held the line at Stonington Borough Shore. And then, you know, they held them off for 3 days. There was almost no casualties or injuries. But the story was epic in the meantime, and they tried to like call in like Westerly and Mystic and Norwich, and they couldn't really get themselves together in like 3 days. So it was just them, and they did it with very limited resources and not being prepared. So I think we have like we grew up in a very epic area.
When this pandemic is over and like we can all go outside and film things again, with big groups of people, I want to create a new show that is just local drunk history. And you're the only narrator.
Just like everyone just recreates.
Just everyone recreates you, and like we pull up like Twitter, and there's a, the lady has a YouTube channel in the 1800s, and she's talking about acorns.
I
That's
yes.
amazing. Yeah, we need to do that. So
I have
thank you.
way too much fun with history. It's terrible.
No, it's not terrible. It's wonderful. Thank you, Jackie.
No
I will
problem.
talk to you soon. She'll be back. Yes?
Sure, I will.
All right.
Even though
Thank
I'm
you.
afraid.
You did great. Tell her she did great in the comments. Bye, everybody. And we will be back in 15 minutes with Ask Lieutenant Dan.